Thanks very much for joining me tonight. I'm not sure I'm a graveyard expert, a graveyard anorak perhaps. So tonight's talk is about Ballyvester Cemetery. You'll see it's there. It's a virtual tour of 20 of the headstones. I'll explain later why I picked 20 each time. And so those are a couple of guys who'll feature in tonight's talk. That's Sir Jack Herman to the left and Robert Bradford to the right. So I've been interested in Donaghadee for a long time, but this next slide is from the Donald Cemetery, and it features Joseph Martin, MB, RUI, Royal University of Ireland, and he lived at Marathon in Donaghadee. So just as an aside, as an introduction to Donaghadee, he lived at, you can still see the house in Marathon is down by the seafront in Donaghadee, but he was the man that donated the flood or paid for the floodlight to be erected in Donaghadee Lighthouse, and you'll see there the plaque on the lighthouse erected to the memory of Dr. Joseph Martin Marathon. So he's put his name on both his headstone and down at the lighthouse itself. Of course, these days the house has been rechristened Snickers. John will not understand that one. So in a forthcoming book that I've got, which I'll be shamelessly plugging at the end of the tour, I feature 20 graves in the parish graveyard in Donaghadee, and this is one of them. This commemorates, erected by Mary Bailey of Donaghadee in memory of her husband John Bailey, who was drowned in Larne Loch the 22nd of February 1844. So I just like that one, aged 32 years. So 22nd of February. And then in each of the 20 chapters, there is a little sketch done by a friend of mine, David Francis, and that is Grace Neal. And so she features in Donaghadee in the parish churchyard entry section. Of course, sponsored by Gavin Bamford. So the first headstone we'll talk about in Ballyvester, first of the 20, is this one. There's a couple of Great War fatalities to start the talk. Can't quite remember where I got this information from. But in the middle, you'll see there it commemorates Rifleman George McFarland, killed in action and interred in France. Rifleman McFarland was serving with the 2nd Battalion Royal Irish Rifles when he was killed in action on the 14th of January 1915, aged 28, and he's commemorated on the Menin Gate Memorial in Ypres. He's also commemorated on a family memorial in Ballyclug, Church of Ireland, near Broughshane, along with his brother James. George was born on the 8th of November 1886 at Moat Road in Ballymena to Robert and Margaret McFarland. George married Agnes Patterson on 7th July 1911 at Belmont Presbyterian Church, and they lived at Bright Street in Belfast, and Agnes later lived at Rosebery Street, again in Belfast. So you'll see there that, well, you'll not see there, but George died in 1915, and as you can see in the headstone, his wife Agnes died in 1976, so 61 years later. The next one is also a Great War related memorial, and that commemorates, you'll see at the top of the headstone, there's at the top left, Rifleman John Orr, Royal Irish Rifles, killed in France in 1917. He was serving with the 12th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles when he was killed in action on the 22nd of November 1917, aged 34, and is commemorated at the Cambrai Memorial at Louisville in France, and is named on the plaque attached to the War Memorial organ in Ballywalter Presbyterian Church. So there's a close-up provided by Nigel Henderson of the plaque at the memorial in Ballywalter Presbyterian Church, and you'll see John Orr there on the top of the third column. Also, there's an Andrew Orr So Nigel might want to send me a message to see if they were related. I don't know if they were. John Orr was the son of John Orr and Mary Orr née Baird of Kilbright, Ballywalter, and the husband of Margaret Jane Orr née McLean of Ballywiskin in Malile. Those are a couple of Great War fatalities or commemorations to start the talk. And then this is the next one, the third one. You can see there in the middle of the headstone, it commemorates their son Alan Brown, killed on active service in USA, 31st of August 1942, aged 19 years, buried in Miami, Oklahoma. So Alan Brown was killed during a training flight in Miami, Oklahoma, and is buried in the British block in the Grand Army of the Republic Cemetery in Miami, Oklahoma. Inscription on his headstone gives his service number 1479901, LAC Alan Brown RAF-VR, 31st of August 1942, age 19. His short life was a life of service. Also buried in the same cemetery are 14 other young British soldiers also lost during training exercises. So that's Alan Brown is in Miami, Oklahoma, as opposed to Miami, Florida, I think the other one is. Next one then, it's quite difficult to read, but in the middle it says Sergeant, it commemorates Thomas Patterson, known as Tommy Muckle, Sergeant RAF, died prisoner of war 9th of October 1944, aged 23 years. Muckle was the youngest of 12 of John and Margaret Anna, known as Maggie Muckle, née Small of Portavoe, Donaghadee. They were married on the 8th of April 1901 in Ballygreeny Presbyterian Church. John Muckle from Malile was a son of Robert Muckle, a labourer. Maggie Small from Portavoe was the daughter of John Small, a farmer. Before joining the RAF, Tommy Muckle was employed as a butcher by Edmund Mills in Windmill Road in Bangor, and he was also a well-known amateur boxer. The County Down Spectator of 15th December 1943 reported that Tommy had died in a Japanese prisoner of war camp in Java. He was 23 when he died of bacillary dysentery and was buried at sea. He's commemorated on the Singapore War Memorial, on the Donaghadee and District Memorial, and in Shore Street Presbyterian Church in Donaghadee. Next one then is this one, the Roberts headstone. So I'm not really going to talk about much about these guys, but you'll see in the middle it commemorates William Henry Roberts, late of Donaghadee Gasworks, died 23rd of July 1951. He is 81 years, and his wife Jane died 27th of May 1956, aged 93 years. They were the parents of this lady, and she featured in my Redburn talk. So this headstone is to commemorates Jessie Chain Getty, née Roberts. And there's a photograph of her to the left. So she was quite a remarkable woman. She was born Jessica Roberts in Glasgow around 1883 to William Henry Roberts, as mentioned earlier, a gasworks manager, and Jane Mahady. In 1901, 1911, the family was living at Mill Street, Newtownards, and Jessie was recorded as being a seamstress in 1911. Of course, all the best people live in Newtownards, are from Newtownards. This is for Mr. Robinson. In 1901 and 11, the family was living at Mill Street in Newtownards, as I say, and Jessie was recorded as being a seamstress. Jessie joined the Ulster Volunteer Force Nursing Corps during the Home Rule crisis and was living at the Gasworks House in Donaghadee when she volunteered for war service with the Voluntary Aid Detachment. She served in at the first Southern General Hospital in Birmingham, and then at the War Hospital at Wimereux. When Jessie returned to Ireland, she served at the Hilden Convalescent Hospital at Galwally House and at the UVF Hospital at Botanic and Queen's University. It was at Galwally House that she met John Boyd Getty, who she married on the 27th of July 1925 at Belfast Registrar's Office. Jesse was awarded the Proficiency in Red Cross Nursing Medal, the Proficiency in Red Cross First Aid Medal, and the Proficiency in Anti-Gas Training. Jesse died on 9th December 2001. As you'll see there from the headstone, aged 107 years. So again, that's Jesse's mum and dad there, and that's Jesse then buried in Redburn Cemetery in Hollywood. So the next one is just it's got a connection to Belfast, and that's why it kind of stood out for me a little bit. It commemorates the Reverend Samuel Rushton Jameson, MA, minister of Ulsterville Presbyterian Church, Belfast, died 20th of October 1952, aged 72 years. So that is the church just before it stopped being Ulsterville Presbyterian Church, and it is now it's now closed as Presbyterian Church, but is now a furniture showroom, quite a top-end furniture showroom. And Chris Turnbull is the current resident of the premises. But also around the back there's a restaurant, quite a posh restaurant, Sapphire, and also up the side you can get into a coffee shop called the Vestry. So that's just an old Presbyterian church which is now being repurposed. But you can see there the Reverend Jameson was the minister there for a number of years. The next one is possibly the cleverest man in Donaghadee. Oh, sorry, that's not right. The next one is the Nelsons, and they were Hugh Nelson Senior, and who's on the left there, and then Hugh Nelson Jr. is on the right with the RNLI logo on his headstone. They were both keen members of the RNLI, but they were both on the Princess Victoria with Hugh Senior. Sorry, they were both on the Sir Samuel Kelly lifeboat when I went to the aid of the Princess Victoria on the 31st of January 1953. Hugh Senior was the coxswain, and you can see there he got the British Empire Medal in 1954. In other words, the year after, sorry, he died the year after in 1954 after the Princess Victoria disaster at age 64, and then his son Hugh Jr. died 2017. Both those guys, to say, were on the Sir Samuel Kelly lifeboat when it went to the aid of the Princess Victoria. The next one then is the cleverest man in Donaghadee. You'll see at the bottom there, Charles Horner Greer McAfee died 16th of August 1978, aged 80 years. And you can see there he's got quite a lot of qualifications. So the main one being the CBE. So he was I gave this talk yesterday to a group in Donaghadee. So he was apparently he was a doctor. He was an obstetrician, gynecologist kind of thing. He lived in the Warren Road in Donaghadee in later life, but in 1951 street directory, he is registered as living at this house, and it is 18 University Square in Belfast. So it's now used as the Senator George Mitchell Global Research Initiative Institute. Sorry, that's 18 University Square. The next one then is one of the guys that featured on the title slide. That's the Reverend Robert Bradford. As you'll see there, his headstone, Reverend Robert John Bradford, ETH, Bachelor of Theology, MP, returned home 14th of November 1981, aged 40 years, precious husband of Nora and darling daddy of Claire. The Reverend Bradford was shot dead by the IRA whilst he was hosting a political surgery at community centre in Finicky. He was an ordained Methodist minister and an Ulster Unionist Member of Parliament for the Belfast South constituency. After Reverend Bradford's funeral service at the Non-Presbyterian Church, which was conducted by the Reverend Roy McGee, Northern Ireland Secretary of State Jim Pryor was verbally abused and jostled by a group of angry loyalists. 4 Reverend Bradford then was interred in Ballyvester. So some of us tuning in tonight might remember that particular incident. Mr. Lamb, for example. Not that I'm saying anything, Davey, but yes, it was quite a notorious incident in Dundonald, where I was living at the time. So also killed, or sorry, this is the front page of the Belfast Telegraph after the Reverend Bradford's assassination. You'll see there his photograph, and to the right, and then you'll see his daughter and wife there, bottom right. But you also see a small photograph of Kenneth Campbell. He was shot dead in the same incident. He was the caretaker in the community centre in Finicky, and he's buried in Roselawn Cemetery. This is his headstone at Roselawn. So you'll see in the middle, well, you'll see at the top, sorry, in loving memory of a dear son, Ken, died 14th of November 1981, aged 29 years. So it doesn't give any indication of how he died, but that's how he died, sadly. The next one then is this man, another Troubles victim, James Ferris, and you'll see there, died in the execution of his duty, 25th of September 1983. Loving and devoted husband of Audrey and dear father of David and James, and an infant son. Sorry, the infant son then died subsequently. Ferris was a prison officer that stabbed during the Maze prison escape of 25th of September 1983, and he died of a heart attack 2 days later. The Maze prison escape, known to Irish Republicans as the Great Escape, Her Majesty's Prison Maze, also known as Long Kesh, which was considered to be one of the most escape-proof prisons in Europe. It was the biggest prison escape in UK history. 38 provisional IRA prisoners escaped from H Block 7 of the prison. 20 other prison officers were injured, including 2 who were shot with guns that were smuggled into the prison. So say James Ferris was stabbed and then died of a heart attack 2 days later. So the next one is another Troubles victim. That's Sergeant William Robert MacDonald, who served with the RUC, as you'll see at the top of the headstone, died in the execution of his duty. 12th of August 1984, aged 29 years, devoted and loving husband of Anne and darling daddy of Stuart and Anne. Sergeant MacDonald was injured in a bomb attack on the Ulster Polytech at Jordanstown on the 3rd of November 1983. He never regained consciousness before his death 9 months later on the 12th of August 1984. He was buried from Movilla Church of Ireland Church in Ards, and before he was interred in Ballyvester, and he was the 200th member of the RUC to be killed during the Troubles. Also killed in the same incident, and both died that day on the 3rd of November 1983, were Inspector John Brian Martin, who was 27. He was buried at Ballydown outside Banbridge, and Sergeant Stephen Alexander Fife. He was buried in Lisburn New. He was 28, and he was buried in Lisburn New Cemetery. So this is Sergeant MacDonald here, and he had a son, aged 6 at the time of his death, and a daughter, aged 4. So the next one then is this lady who died in 1984, and you'll see there treasured memories of Hilary Ina Elizabeth McKinley, born 26th of November 1962, died 29th of May 1984, result of flying accident at Lethbridge in Canada. So I didn't really know much about Hilary, but prior to the talk yesterday, but someone who was on the talk said that Hilary was actually a nurse and serving over in Canada, and she was killed during as a result of a flying accident, as it says in her headstone, when the plane that she was traveling on went down. So that's it's unusual to see a it's more common to see members of the RAF, usually males, commemorated and died as a result of air accidents. So that one stood out a little bit because it's a female who died as a result of an air crash. So this is the next one then. This is in loving memory. You'll see at the base of the headstone of Major Ronnie Bunting, RAME, a dear husband and father, passed away 28th of June 1984, died in Christ. So Major Ronnie Bunting was an army officer and a unionist political figure. He was commissioned into the Armagh and Down Army Cadet Force in May 1946, and then transferred to the REME, the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, as a lieutenant from March 1950. He was promoted to captain in 1952 and retired with the honorary rank of major in 1960. After leaving the army, he worked as a mathematics lecturer in the Belfast College of Technology. His first involvement with politics was as an election agent to the Republican Labour Party MP Gerry Fitt, although he broke from Fitt and became a close associate of Ian Paisley, playing a leading role in Paisley's campaigns against the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, as well as running unsuccessfully for the Protestant Unionist Party in the Northern Ireland general election of 1969 in Belfast Victoria Ward. As head of the Loyal Citizens of Ulster, Bunting led the protests against many civil rights marches, most notably the 1969 Belfast to Derry Civil Rights March organised by the People's Democracy, which resulted in a particularly bloody confrontation at Burntullet. In a Faraday court case in 1969, Bunting was sentenced to 3 months imprisonment, along with Ian Paisley, for his role in the disturbances. So you'll see there in the middle of the base of the headstone, it also commemorates Ronald Terence Bunting, died 15th of October 1980. He was Ronnie Bunting's son, and he went on to serve as a member of the official IRA and then joined the INLA before he was shot dead by the UDA in 1980. Following his son's death, Major Bunting took no further role in politics, but later told an inquest he felt his son was killed because of his belief in social justice. So a little bit unusual to see somebody so actively involved, along with Ian Paisley, and then the son joined the official IRA and then the INLA. The next one then is this one. If you see at the bottom, it commemorates the Lady Jean Herman, and she died 17th of November 1986. That was Sir Jack Herman's first wife. She died of cancer and is buried with her parents, Arthur Henry Webb, who died 12th of March 1952, and Florence Ada, who died 8th of November 1955. So we'll mention Sir Jack again later on, but that's his first wife there. And you can see there's quite a number of people buried in that grave. Pardon me. The next one then is this one, William J. James, and you'll see there the CIL logo at the side of the headstone. CIL stands for the Commissioners of Irish Lights. It's often shortened to Irish Lights, or CIL, and it's the body that serves as the General Lighthouse Authority for Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland and their adjacent seas and islands. So it's not actually Donaghadee Lighthouse, but it's obviously a man who would work for Irish Lights, of which Donaghadee Lighthouse was one. The next one then is Roy Bradford. You'll see here the Right Honorary Roy Hamilton Bradford, born in 1926, died in 1998. He studied at the Royal Belfast Academical Institution and then Trinity College, Dublin, before working in the British Army. Then he moved to London, where he worked for the BBC and ITV. In 1960, he published a novel called Excelsior. At the 1965 Northern Ireland election, Bradford was elected for the UUP in Belfast, Victoria, defeating David Blakely, MP of the Northern Ireland Labour Party. From 1969 to 1971, He was a Minister of Commerce, becoming Minister of Development from 1971 to 1972. At the 1973 Northern Ireland Assembly election, Bradford was elected in Belfast East. He sided in favour of the Sunningdale Agreement and remained loyal to Brian Faulkner and was Minister in charge of the Department of Environment until June 1974. He stood unsuccessfully in North Down at the February 1974 general election. Bradford completed a second novel, Last Ditch, in 1982. In 1989, he was elected to North Down Borough Council, where he joined his wife Hazel in the UUP group. He worked as a journalist, writing an influential weekly column in the Belfast newsletter, and also served as a councillor and mayor of North Down. Along with Martin Dillon, he also co-authored Rogue Warrior of the SAS, the Blair Main legend. Roy and Hazel's Bradford's son, Connor, was a presenter of Good Morning Ulster for BBC Northern Ireland. And their son, Toby, was also the eye in the sky. So also commemorated in the headstones, mentioned her Hazel Elizabeth, and she was Bradford, and she was involved with the Ulster Unionist Party as well, and she received an OBE. Next one then is Billy Spence. You can see there in the headstone, a dear brother and brother-in-law, beloved son of Madge and Charlie, tragically murdered by an intruder, 1st of July 2008. Billy was the owner of the Tara B&B in the Princetown Road in Bangor. He was stabbed 19 times by an intruder. So I believe the intruder was caught, and it was a homeless man on one of the homeless projects in Dufferin Avenue. So he was sentenced because of the murder of Billy Spence. So I mentioned the First Lady Herman earlier, and this is her husband. This is Sir John Charles, known as Jack Herman, OBE QPM Queen's Police Medal. So he was the RUC Chief Constable from 1980 to 1989, and he was born 23rd of November 1928 and died 6th of November 2008. So there's the RUC logo on the top left, along with the George Cross. Sir Jack first joined the RUC in 1951. His period as Chief Constable was one of the most turbulent periods of the Troubles, included the 1981 Republican hunger strikes and probes into the so-called shoot-to-kill allegations made against RUC. Sir Jack was also Chief Constable when the RUC suffered its biggest single loss of the Troubles, when 9 officers were murdered in an IRA mortar attack on Newry Police Station in 1985. He remained a target for Republicans long after leaving office. In 2007, in other words, the year before he died, he had to be moved from one nursing home to another because of a threat. Former RUC Assistant Chief Constable Alan McQuillan said Sir Jack was a huge figure in the history of the RUC. He was a very energetic and dynamic leader. But when you got to know him, you saw he was driven by a total passion for impartial policing, for protecting the community, and had an immense pride in the men and women who served in the RUC. So that's Sir Jack there, bottom right. So the next one is a quirky one. This is Walter Cunningham. He was born 3rd of May 1927, died 4th of December 2008. It turns out that he was a horse dealer, as might be suggested from the headstone, and he lived in Dundonald. So he would have lived in Dundonald when I lived in Dundonald, and you'll see at the base of the headstone there a plaque which commemorates Grandad Walter, a little pony and representation of a pony and trap on that plaque. So Walt, from going back into the mist of my mind, I can vaguely remember a guy on a horse and cart in Dundonald. He lived in Cumberland, the Cumberland development off the Cumber Road, so not far from where I was living as a teenager. So I think that was probably Walter Cunningham. So I'm not sure why he is buried in Ballyvester. So 2 more to go. This is commemorates Robert Henry Wilson. You'll see at the top MBE. You'll see at the top of the headstone there the logo of the Donaghadee Male Voice Choir. And he's commemorated as a devoted husband, dad, and grandpa. Passed away 16th May 2015, age 75. And the base of the headstone says, "Now with God's Choir." Wilson began his career as a conductor at 16, before joining Donaghadee in 1968, he was the Deputy Director of Victoria Male Choir. Under his guidance, the choir, which had only 18 members when he took over in 1968, built an international reputation. It was the first choir from Ireland to sing behind the Iron Curtain in Russia, also performing in the US, including their Carnegie Hall, Canada, Malta, Poland, and Bulgaria. The choir chalked up more than 40 first prizes at festivals in Britain, and Robert Wilson was awarded an MBE in 2008 for services to music, and then the Donaghadee Male Voice Choir Hall on Shore Street was named in his honour. So you'll see then at the plaque bottom right at the Choir Hall on Shore Street in Donaghadee, named after Robert Wilson. Robert and his wife Maureen celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 2014, and he was survived in Maureen, their son Neil, and daughter Leslie, and 8 grandchildren. After his father's passing, Neil said, "My father made an impact with people both as an accountant and as a man of music right to the end." Speaking of the end, this is the last one, and this commemorates William Campbell Melville, MBE. He received his MBE, which is replicated there on the headstone top right, for public service in June 2003. So he worked for the Preparation Service in Northern Ireland, and he was in charge of the Borstal, just on the far side from Ballyvester of Malyle. His death notice said he died on the 1st of July 2015, peacefully at hospital. He was late of Beachfield Drive, Donaghadee. He was he was remembered by his beloved wife Joan, and he was a much loved father of Elaine and Paul. And the service was held in Shore Street Presbyterian Church. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last headstone I'll talk about. And this is my forthcoming book, 2020, and it features 20 graves in each of 20 different local cemeteries. It says the base up there, and it should be available within the next few weeks. One of the 20 cemeteries featured is in Donaghadee, in the parish church. So thanks very much for listening, folks, and next week I hope to do a talk about Drumbeg Cemetery.